Hello ladies and gentlemen, today I will be discussing the argument of complexity and how it applies to deism and essentially theism in general. The main reason why I believe it should mainly focus on deism is because this argument revolves around the ideology of deism, and deists are the ones who are mainly advocates of this argument, and it mainly links into deism, but obviously it links into generic theist religious beliefs as well. But it originated under deist perspectives epistemologically, and ultimately, when addressing the topic of complexity, I believe deists are the best advocates of it because once you put on the theist side, you also need to agree to the fact that God interferes with the complexity that he created, and on the other side, deism doesn't agree with that statement. I would like to mainly address any kind of deist that watches this movie, as well as theists in general, um, because I myself was a deist probably for a year and a half, and the main reason why I was a deist is because of all this complexity argument, and I will obviously elaborate on it, and also because of the kind of branches and links I can take out of it and make different arguments based on the complexity arguments, and it all resulted in the case's opinion that there is a creator, but theologically he or it does not interfere with the creation, the complex creation that it created. So therefore I would like to address deists because most deists that are still around are mainly revolving around this argument, so I would really like to address it from obviously a secular perspective and refute it and keep moving on. The main reason why I'm not trying to focus on theists specifically for this video is because theists have a whole bunch of arguments and a whole bunch of logical fallacies that are trying to just push it in our minds as atheists and just try to tell us, well, you know, there's a God because second law of thermodynamics or some sort of bullshit like that. And I would not like to address any of those arguments because they have been refuted over and over for decades, and even today on YouTube, so I believe I would waste my time. I would really like to address specifically these complexity arguments under the framework of deism, because that is an approach that it's unique and I have not yet seen it, and I decided to go ahead and do so. Okay, so let's just go straight to the argument. Obviously, it kind of answers itself. It says the world is too complex, so therefore there's a God. We see all these beautiful trees and the river and the mountains and the sun, and it's also aesthetically appealing to us, and yet it's also beautiful to us, and it's also wonderful, and there must be a creator behind all of these because obviously it just cannot pop by itself. It's too complex, it's too beautiful. If you're just addressing the aesthetic argument, I would just say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. As a DSC, obviously, are familiar with the process of natural selection and the way nature has designed us throughout ongoing process of evolution. We ended up into liking nature aesthetically. That doesn't mean nature is a good place to be. We obviously know Darwinism is predominantly nature and the strongest survive. It's kind of sadistic to say that that is beautiful. So I would just like to point that out as well. And also another big argument in regards to complex argument is life in general. I mean, this is a wonderful baby that I have drawn. The miracle of birth is also a really significant part of the complexity case and argument in general, because it addresses the fact that the way birth occurs, there's so many things that can go wrong, so there must be a creator because there's so many things that can go wrong, and these things can go wrong in any process of birth, and none of them do, because if they do, obviously the baby doesn't pop out, and as we know, we're 7 billion people officially on Earth, so this is an ongoing process that doesn't really fail, and because the chances are so low, and it's such an ongoing process, there must be a creator behind it. So the ultimate framework of the complexity argument is that all of these wonderful things, in their complexity, result into a creator. For the benefit of the time, let's just call him God. He is God. You might be agnostic towards the God's traits. You might not know whether he is a specific kind of God or kind of attributes that the God has. You just know that because of all these complex. Let's just assume that there is a God. I mean, you don't need more in order to affirm the argument. All you need is to agree to God. You don't need to exactly agree to a specific God or gods. But let's just take a singular God, undefining any propositions in regards to God's attributes. Just say this supernatural being has created the universe, hence the complexity. So, when looking at all of these wonderful complex things, nature and life, you result into God. But as a creator, God has to be more complex than nature, than the nature that he created, as well as the life. Obviously, everybody should agree to this in case they're actually advocating theistic beliefs. God is far more complex than nature. So if you continue by this logic, because God is so wonderfully complex, he has to have another creator, another God, which in this God's nature is superior towards the God that created the nature in which we live in today. And then this other God, obviously he's more complex. It doesn't mean he's a better God, it just means that he's more complex. And then this other God, due to his complexity, he has to result into another creator, hence creating an infinite amount of creators. This obviously is a logical fallacy. It is absurd to claim that there are an infinite amount of gods. One created another one, and because of their complexity, it is an ongoing process of creation. Now, people might just say, well, we just only try to prove that there is one God, or that this specific argument makes no sense due to the fact that a complexity argument only addresses nature. Well, then I'll say that, okay, so you're telling me that there is a God, a creator, that is more complex than nature and life or anything that we have on Earth or in the universe in general. There is a God, more complex. But according to your logic, it's fine to say nature is too complex, therefore it hence a creator. But when something even more complex than nature shows up, you're going to tell me that that thing doesn't require a creator. There's some sort of logical fallacy. This argument makes no sense unless you agree to the logic that there is an infinite amount of creators. And then if you say you only need specifically for this, and because God by definition cannot be created, I probably could argue that matter cannot be created or destroyed either, but for the sake of this specific argument, you would say that nature, for example, let's take nature, is less complex than God. And you only need to prove the smaller complexity as a creation. Well, then I'll say God is more complex, and if God doesn't need a creator, that means nature doesn't need a creator either, because it is less complex than a creator. So ultimately this argument fails on both grounds of logical processing. And ultimately this argument drops, and there is no need for you as a deist to believe that the world is too complex, hence a creator. This thesis that has been ongoing in the deist perspective as well as in just theistic arguments in general. But again, theists have a sack of shit arguments that never make any sense and never stand against secular or philosophical or scientific arguments in general. And this is why, according to whichever angle or tangent you're trying to approach the complexity argument, there is no way that there is a God according to the complexity argument. And this is why I believe that the complexity argument drops, and this is not the only reason why there is no God in my opinion, but that is just open for another type of debate. Specifically, this video addresses the complexity argument and how it applies to the theistic beliefs and deism especially. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Take care.